The day the Forsaken arrived, the sky shattered like glass. For those on the ground, it began as an unnatural rumble in the air, a noise too deep to come from the earth and too sharp to come from a storm. Then, without warning, the heavens darkened. Above London, clouds turned sickly green as alien dreadships emerged from folds in space, each one a leviathan of black metal, kilometers long, blotting out the sun. People in the streets stopped and stared, phones in hand, disbelief frozen on their faces. At first, they thought it might be a mistake, some grand scientific experiment gone wrong or a visual illusion. But then the beam struck. A blinding column of light speared down from one of the ships, obliterating the tower bridge in an instant. A roar like 1,000 thunderclaps followed as shockwaves tore across the city, shattering windows and hurling people through the air. Cars flipped like toys, trees turned to splinters, and the streets descended into chaos. Commander Ethan Cade, stationed at a makeshift military HQ in the London Underground, felt the blast rumble through the earth. Maps and radios clattered off tables as officers scrambled to understand what was happening. "Report," Cade barked, gripping the edge of the table as dust trickled from the ceiling. "We've lost contact with half the city," a young officer shouted, terror in his eyes. They just wiped out Tower Bridge, sir. It's gone." Before Cade could process, every screen in the room flickered and died. A chilling static consumed the airwaves before a new image appeared, a Forsaken. The alien's face was cold and skeletal, its form draped in flowing dark armor that seemed to pulse with energy. Its eyes, glowing like embers, stared into every screen on Earth. The room fell silent as its voice, deep, hollow, and unnervingly calm, spoke in flawless English. "Humans of Earth, we are the Forsaken. You are unworthy of sovereignty. Your kind has been judged and found lacking." The alien paused as if savoring its power over them. "Surrender, and your extinction will be delayed. Resist, and you will be purged." The broadcast cut out, and for a long moment, silence reigned in the underground bunker. Then, the city above began to scream. Cade didn't hesitate. "Get me Reyes, now." Within seconds, Lieutenant Sarah Reyes, his second in command, sprinted into the room, breathing hard. "It's bad, Commander. They're hitting every major city, New York, Beijing, Tokyo, Moscow. Reports are coming in. They're not bombing indiscriminately. They're targeting key infrastructure." "Efficient." Cade's fists tightened. He turned to the others in the room, his voice steady despite the chaos above. "Patch me through to every surviving unit. Civilians first. Soldiers, hold the line as long as you can." "Hold the line." Against that, an officer stammered, sweat glistening on his brow. Cade's eyes burned with fury. "You don't understand. If we don't hold now, we don't hold ever." Reyes looked at him with grim determination. "I'll start evacuations to the underground tunnels. What about you?" "I'm going up there." Cade grabbed his rifle and helmet, strapping them on with practiced speed. "If humanity's going to survive this, we can't fight from shadows. We make them bleed now." Outside, the streets of London were unrecognizable. Forsaken war machines, reavers, descended from the dreadships, towering six-legged mechanical beasts bristling with energy cannons. They stomped through the city, disintegrating buildings and sweeping away resistance with effortless precision. Cade emerged from the bunker into the carnage. Fires licked at the edges of the street, and the acrid stench of burning steel filled the air. Through the smoke, he saw a reaver crouched over what had been a crowded train station, its cannons charging for another blast. Civilians screamed as they ran, but there was nowhere left to go. Cade's jaw clenched as he leveled his rifle. "Reyes, if you're hearing this, get those people underground. I'll buy you time." The reaver's cannons locked onto a crowd of survivors. Cade sprinted forward, shouting, firing, anything to make himself a target. The machine turned its glowing eyes on him. The ground shook as it took aim. Cade didn't stop running. Cliffhanger. Just as the Reaver's cannons fired, something hurtled out of the sky. A Forsaken dreadship was crashing, spiraling out of control. Cade dove for cover as fire and debris rained down, unsure if it was a miracle or a sign of something far worse. The crash shook the city to its core. For a moment, the towering Reaver froze, its glowing cannons sputtering as debris rained down from above. A Forsaken dreadship, one of the Leviathans that had hung over London, spiraled out of the sky, smoke pouring from ruptures along its hull. It smashed into the Thames with a sound that seemed to split the world open, sending a tidal wave of water and wreckage surging through the streets. Commander Ethan Cade pressed himself against the charred remains of a bus, shielding his face from the flying debris. Heat singed his hair, and the roar of the impact drowned out every other sound. Then, silence. Not the calm kind, the kind that comes before the next wave of hell. "Reyes, you still alive?" Cade barked into his comm, coughing smoke out of his lungs. Static answered, but after a beat, Reyes' voice crackled through, sharp as ever. "Barely, sir. That ship came down like a meteor. What the hell happened?" "No idea, but I'm not wasting the opportunity." Cade shoved himself up, rifle in hand. The streets were chaos. Water rushing over shattered pavement, fires licking through the fog of destruction, and survivors scrambling to flee. The Reaver, now glitching, shuddered violently and collapsed into the rubble, its systems fried by shockwaves from the crash. Cade spotted a group of civilians trapped under a collapsed building facade. "Hang on," he shouted, rushing forward. He knelt, straining against the weight of the rubble until others came to help, people who moments ago were terrified, now rallied by his determination. Together, they lifted the debris, pulling the wounded free. A middle-aged man, covered in soot, stared at Cade with wide eyes. "How can we fight this? These things, they're unstoppable." Cade's glare could have cut steel. "We fight because we don't have a choice. You can run now, or you can stand. Your call." The man hesitated, then nodded, steeling himself. Cade turned to see Rice sprinting toward him, leading a group of evacuees through the wreckage. Her dark hair was matted with sweat and dust, but her focus was razor-sharp. "Commander, we've got survivors pouring into the underground shelters," she reported. "But the Forsaken are sweeping the area. We won't hold for long unless we figure out what just brought that ship down." Cade's mind raced. A Forsaken ship didn't just crash. Something, or someone, had done that. He glanced at the wreckage smoldering in the river, the ship's twisted remains glowing like an ember in the gloom. "We need answers, and we need them fast. If the Forsaken can bleed, we'll find a way to make them pour." Suddenly, Rey's comm lit up with an incoming message, encrypted but human. She frowned and put it on speaker. "This is Dr. Asha Patel, broadcasting to any surviving resistance units. I have intelligence critical to humanity's survival. If you hear this, come to the Highland Research Bunker. Coordinates transmitting now. Hurry, they're coming." Cade's eyes narrowed. "Who's they?" Before Reyes could reply, the ground rumbled again, this time with an unnatural hum. A Forsaken hunter-killer, smaller but faster than a Reaver, shot over the rooftops, scanning the ruins with blinding searchlights. "They're here," Reyes shouted. Cade didn't hesitate. "Move, get everyone underground." He grabbed Rey's arm and pulled her into motion, shouting orders to civilians as the hunter-killer unleashed a barrage of plasma bolts. Explosions tore through the street, cutting off escape routes. A young boy stumbled in the chaos, and without thinking, Cade scooped him up, sprinting for cover as plasma fire scorched the pavement at his heels. The entrance to the bunker came into view, a rusted maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for a truck. Reyes was already waving people inside, barking orders as Cade dove in with the boy. The blast doors slammed shut behind them, cutting off the hunter-killer's relentless fire. In the dim light of the underground shelter, panting and covered in ash, Cade set the boy down gently. He looked around. Dozens of civilians huddled together, wide-eyed and silent. They were broken but alive. Cade straightened, his voice carrying through the gloom. Listen up. I know you're scared. I know you think we can't win this, but we can. We will. They think we're weak. They think we'll kneel. But we're human, and we don't quit. Not now, not ever. Ray stood at his side, her expression fierce as she added, This is our world, and we're taking it back. The civilians stirred, murmurs of hope spreading through the crowd like a spark catching fire. Cade turned to Ray's. Get us moving to those coordinates. If Dr. Patel's got answers, we're damn well getting them. Cliffhanger. As they prepare to leave, Ray's picks up Forsaken chatter on her hacked comm system. A chilling voice says, The humans are fleeing to the highlands. Dispatch the Reaver Claws. Leave no survivors. The Highland winds howled like ghosts as Cade's team pushed forward, their convoy rumbling over cracked roads and through barren fields. The night sky above was bruised and lifeless, faintly illuminated by the burning wreckage of Earth's cities on the horizon. The survivors they had brought with them sat huddled in the truck beds, silent, hollow-eyed, and clinging to what little hope remained. Lieutenant Reyes sat beside Cade in the lead vehicle, her fingers flying across a handheld console as she scanned for Forsaken patrols. We're almost at the coordinates, she murmured, her voice low but tense. The transmission's repeating, but there's no response to our comms. Either this Dr. Patel is dead, or she's expecting us. Cade gripped the steering wheel tighter, his gaze fixed on the mist-covered mountains ahead. She's alive. If she wasn't, the Forsaken wouldn't be this interested. As if summoned, a deafening shriek split the air. High above, the silhouettes of Reaver Claws, small, agile hunter drones, swooped through the clouds. Their engines roared like banshees, cutting across the convoy's path and spraying the ground with pinpoint plasma fire. Take cover, Cade shouted. He slammed the brakes, yanking the wheel to the side as a blast tore through the road inches ahead of them. The truck skidded to a halt, smoke and sparks filling the air. Behind them, explosions rocked the convoy as plasma bolts struck home, flipping vehicles like toys and scattering survivors into the fields. Reyes cursed, ducking low. They're hurting us. They know where we're going. And they're not stopping us, Cade growled. He grabbed his rifle and kicked open the door. Reyes, get the civilians moving toward the bunker on foot. Use the terrain to hide their advance. What about you? I'm buying time. Before she could argue, Cade was already moving, sprinting up a nearby ridgeline. He dropped to a knee and raised his rifle, taking aim at the closest Reaver Claw. The drones, glowing with an eerie purple light, screamed through the air in tight formations. Cade exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger, and a precise shot found its mark. One Reaver Claw exploded, its wreckage tumbling like a meteor. The Forsaken machines adjusted instantly, circling to focus fire on him. Cade grinned grimly as he ran, dodging and weaving between rocks while spraying rounds at the oncoming drones. Come on, you alien bastards, let's dance. From behind, a blast shook the earth. Rey's voice crackled over the comm, frantic. Cade, they're deploying ground units. Reaver infantry, I don't know how long we can hold them off. Cade glanced back. Shadowy figures were emerging through the mist. Forsaken soldiers, their forms unnaturally tall and armored, weapons glowing with malice. They moved with a predatory grace, closing in on the civilians. Get them underground, Cade barked, his boots pounding against rock as he fought to flank the enemy. His earpiece crackled again, this time with a new voice. Commander Cade, this is Dr. Patel. I see you're bringing the Forsaken to my doorstep. Cade stopped short, startled. You're alive. For now. But if you want to survive this, I suggest you follow the light. Ahead of him, a sudden burst of golden light erupted from the base of the nearest mountain, a hidden tunnel entrance sliding open like the mouth of some sleeping giant. Automated turrets extended from the rock walls, spitting rounds of human-modified ammunition at the Forsaken soldiers. Plasma bolts met gunfire in a fiery exchange as Paddle's defenses roared to life. "Go, go!" Cade shouted into the comm, waving at Race and the survivors below. The civilians bolted for the entrance, ducking under crossfire while the automated guns bought them precious seconds. Race dragged the last survivor inside, her voice echoing through the comms. "We're in. Cade, move your ass." Cade turned and sprinted toward the entrance, firing blind over his shoulder as Forsaken drones screamed above him. A plasma bolt struck the ground near his feet, sending him flying forward. Pain flared up his side, but he forced himself to crawl, pulling his battered body through the closing tunnel doors just as they slammed shut. Darkness enveloped him, broken only by the faint glow of overhead lights. Dr. Patel stood waiting, short, unkempt, and wiry, her lab coat streaked with grime. Her sharp eyes locked onto Cade as he staggered to his feet. "Welcome to the Highland Research Bunker, Commander. You've just brought a world of trouble with you." Cade grinned through the pain, holding up his rifle. "Trouble's my middle name." Patel didn't smile. "Then let's hope you're ready, because if we don't move fast, humanity's already lost." Cliffhanger. Patel reveals a Forsaken neural interface system, a dangerous experiment that could allow humans to hijack alien machines. But survival comes at a deadly cost. The process could kill anyone brave enough to try. The Highland Research Bunker was a hive of frantic energy. Stark, utilitarian corridors buzzed with flickering fluorescent lights as survivors huddled in corners, their faces drawn and hollow. A low, constant hum vibrated through the walls, a sound that hinted at machinery buried deep beneath the mountain. Dr. Asha Patel led Cade and Race through a series of heavy blast doors, past scientists scrambling to pack equipment or barking orders at assistants. The air smelled of oil, ozone, and desperation. "We've been studying the Forsaken since the first ship fell," Patel said briskly, her voice echoing through the steel halls. "Analyzing their tech, their biology, and their weaknesses. It wasn't long before we found something unique." Cade, still limping from the plasma burns he'd taken earlier, kept pace. "Unique how?" Patel stopped at a reinforced door marked Restricted Access. She turned, her eyes sharp. "The Forsaken interface with their machines directly. It's not just technology, it's an extension of their consciousness connected through a neural link. Their ships, their drones, their war machines, all are driven by thought." Ray's frowned. "That's why they move so fast. They don't need to push buttons or give orders. It's instinctive." "Exactly," Pato said, punching a code into the panel. The door hissed open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, dominated by a massive, half-disassembled Forsaken control chair. Its alien design pulsed faintly with violet light, veins of energy running through its curved metal frame like something alive. Cables snaked from the chair, hooked into nearby servers and human equipment. Cade eyed it warily. "You've got Forsaken tech in here. Isn't that dangerous?" "Everything about survival is dangerous," Patel shot back, crossing the room to a control terminal. "We found this neural interface aboard a downed scout ship. My team spent months reverse engineering it, and we discovered we can modify it for human use." Cade froze, his voice low. "You're saying we can pilot their machines?" Patel turned, her expression grave. "Yes, we can turn their weapons against them. Drones, reavers, even dreadships. With the right mind in that chair, we could cripple their war effort." Ray's eyes widened. That's a game changer." Cade didn't share her excitement. He stared at the chair, his gut twisting. "There's a catch, isn't there?" Patel hesitated, then nodded. "The Forsaken neural systems aren't designed for us. Connecting to it pushes the human brain past its limit. Every attempt has ended the same way." Cade's voice was ice. "Dead." "Yes," Patel admitted softly. "The process burns out neural pathways, no one survived more than 10 minutes. But if we can find someone strong enough, resilient enough, they might last long enough to hijack a Forsaken war machine and strike a critical blow. She looked at Cade, and we need that blow. The room fell silent. The hum of the alien machine seemed louder now, pulsing like a heartbeat. Cade felt every eye turn to him. "You're thinking about volunteering, aren't you?" Reyes said sharply. "Don't." Cade's jaw tightened. "It's not about me. If we don't fight back, billions more are going to die. We need this." Patel tapped a screen, revealing maps of Forsaken forces advancing across the globe. Red lines marked their progression, closing in on the last pockets of human resistance. "We're running out of time," she said. "The Forsaken are sweeping this planet clean, Commander. We have hours, maybe days, before they break what's left of humanity." Cade turned to Reyes. "Get the survivors prepped for evac. If I can hijack a Forsaken war machine, we'll draw their attention away and buy time." Reyes grabbed his arm, her voice low and fierce. "You're not throwing your life away for a long shot." "It's not throwing it away if it saves lives." Cade's gaze was steady. "I won't ask anyone to do what I wouldn't. That's not who I am." Reyes stared at him, her frustration evident, but she finally let him go. "You're the stubborn bastard they say you are." Patel gestured toward the chair. "Once you're in, the neural interface will sync to your brain. You'll feel the machine like it's part of you. Move carefully. The pain." She paused, her voice faltering. "The pain will be immense." Cade stepped toward the chair, staring at its pulsing glow. For a moment, he imagined the Forsaken using it. Merciless creatures enslaving machines with a thought. Now it was humanity's turn. "I don't care about pain," he said softly, "as long as I make them bleed." He lowered himself into the chair, the metal strangely warm against his skin. Patel's team rushed around him, attaching cables and preparing systems. "Beginning neural sync," Patel said. The machine hummed louder, vibrating the air. Cade gritted his teeth as something cold and electric began crawling into his skull, slithering through his mind like living wires. His vision flickered, filled with violet light. Then the pain hit. It was like fire exploding in his brain, his veins turning to molten steel. His fingers curled into fists, nails biting into his palms. Somewhere distant, he heard Reyes shouting and Patel yelling orders, but their voices were drowned out as his mind connected. And suddenly, Cade saw through different eyes, not human, Forsaken. A Reaver war machine stood idle on a battlefield miles away. Its systems pulsed in his mind, waiting for orders. Cade grinned through the agony, blood trickling from his nose. "Let's see how you like it when the prey bites back." Cliffhanger. The Reaver machine systems come alive under Cade's control, but alarms blare. The Forsaken are aware of the hijack and are converging on their position. Cade's scream was swallowed by the pulsing hum of the Forsaken machine. Fire seared through his skull, every nerve screaming, every thought clawing for control. For a moment, he wasn't Commander Ethan Cade. He was drowning, consumed by alien instinct, his mind teetering on the edge of obliteration. Then clarity. A new awareness settled over him, his vision splitting into layers of violet energy and crimson targeting grids. He could feel it, the Reaver war machine, waiting at his command, its body now an extension of his will. The towering mechs stood on a distant battlefield, its jagged silhouette bathed in the eerie glow of a ruined city. Cade's perspective shifted as the machine turned its head, the ground rumbling with its massive footfalls. "I can see through its eyes." "Commander, do you hear me?" Patel's voice pierced through the chaos, sharp and strained. "Neural sync at 87%. You're in control, but not for long. We need to move." Cade's breath came in ragged gasps, blood dripping from his nose. His body back in the Highland bunker sat rigid in the Forsaken chair, muscles seizing as the connection burned through him. But his mind was free, alive within the Reaver. Cade turned his gaze to the horizon. Across the rubble-strewn plains, Forsaken drones and infantry moved like a swarm of locusts, dark shapes pouring toward the bunker's hidden location. Leading them was a Forsaken Titan, a war engine twice the size of a Reaver, its cannon arms glowing with the promise of annihilation. Patel's voice returned, frantic. "Cade, you need to focus. If they find us—" "They won't," Cade growled. He reached out, willed, and the Reaver responded. Gears groaned as its massive arms moved, its energy core flaring brighter. Cade's thoughts bowled into the machine systems, and targeting data scrolled through his vision. A Forsaken gunship screamed overhead. Cade tracked it instinctively. "Let's play," he whispered. The Reaver raised its arm, plasma cannons charging. A heartbeat later, a bolt of molten light erupted from its weapon, striking the gunship mid-flight. It detonated, a shockwave rippling outward as flaming debris rained onto the battlefield. Impact registered. Patel's tone shifted to disbelief. "You hit it." "Yeah," Cade said through gritted teeth, "and I'm just getting started." From their hidden position in the bunker, Reyes and the survivors watched the distant explosions light up the night. A chorus of awe and confusion spread through the room. Reyes pressed her calm, her voice cracking. "Cade, we can see it. That's you, isn't it? You're piloting that thing." Cade smirked, wiping blood from his face as he flexed the Reaver's metal fingers. The machine mimicked the motion perfectly, its movements terrifying in their fluidity. "Damn right it's me," he replied. The Forsaken forces reacted with inhuman speed, swarming toward Cade's stolen Reaver like ants defending their hive. Drones spiraled down from the sky, plasma bolts tearing through the air. Cade twisted the Reaver's massive frame, moving like a predator. He fired back, energy beams sweeping the battlefield and vaporizing drones mid-flight. "Commander, the Titan is advancing." Patel's warning was punctuated by a tremor as the massive Forsaken war engine began its slow march toward Cade. Its cannons glowed brighter, the energy within building to catastrophic levels. Cade turned to face it, his pulse hammering in his chest. Even through the haze of pain, a surge of exhilaration ran through him. Humanity's weapons had never been able to challenge something like this, but now he was the weapon. The Titan unleashed its first shot. A colossal beam of violet energy roared toward him, and Cade threw the Reaver sideways, the beam shearing through a city block behind him, reducing it to ash. "Not today," Cade growled. Pushing the Reaver into a sprint, he charged at the Titan, the ground buckling beneath its massive strides. Plasma fire rained down, scorching metal and armor, but Cade pressed on, pushing the machine harder, faster. His hands curled tighter around invisible controls as he unleashed a barrage of cannon fire. The Titan staggered, explosions peppering its side, but it stood firm, its energy core swelling with power. Patel's voice rang in Cade's ears, her tone desperate. "Cade, the neural load is spiking. You're going to burn out." Cade's vision blurred at the edges, blackness creeping in, but he forced himself to focus. The Titan loomed before him, its cannon rising for one final shot. Cade roared, shoving all his remaining strength into the machine systems. He leaped the Reaver onto the Titan, slamming into its armored chest. Cade swung the Reaver's colossal fists, denting the Titan's hull with each blow. "Come on," Cade bellowed, feeling his mind fracturing under the strain. "Fall, damn you." With one final punch, Cade drove the Reaver's plasma cannon into the Titan's energy core and fired point blank. The resulting explosion shattered the night. A blinding light consumed the battlefield as shockwaves ripped outward, throwing Forsaken forces into chaos. Cade felt the connection snap, his mind wrenched back into his body like a slingshot. Darkness swallowed him. Cliffhanger. Cade wakes in the bunker, bleeding and weak, but alive. Outside, Reyes reports the impossible. The Forsaken forces are retreating. For the first time, humanity has drawn blood. But at what cost? Cade's eyes snapped open to the faint buzz of fluorescent lights and the heavy pounding of his heart. For a moment, the world swam. Blurry, unfocused shapes drifted across his vision. His head throbbed like it was splitting apart, each heartbeat a hammer strike behind his eyes. "You're awake." Ray's voice pulled him from the void, sharp and unyielding. Cade turned his head slowly, every movement screaming protest. Ray stood at his bedside, her fatigue stained with dust and ash, a dark cut streaked across her temple. "What happened?" Cade croaked, his throat raw and dry. Ray's expression softened. "You did it. You took down the Titan." The explosion sent the Forsaken into chaos. "They've pulled back for now." She paused, her voice lowering. "We pulled you out of that chair just before it fried you completely. Thought we lost you." Cade swallowed hard, memories flickering like a broken film reel. The Reaver's power, the Titan's collapse, the blinding light. Then nothing. Casualties. Minimal. Patel got most of the civilians to the lower levels when the Forsaken started shelling the area. The bunker held. Ray's lips quirked into the faintest smile. "You saved a lot of people, Cade." Cade pushed himself upright, groaning as every muscle screamed in revolt. His reflection in a cracked mirror on the wall startled him. His face was gaunt, pale, with deep shadows under his bloodshot eyes. A dried line of crimson trailed from his nose. "I don't feel saved," he muttered. "Commander Cade." Dr. Patel's voice cut through the room as she entered, flanked by her assistants. Her coat was rumpled, dark rings under her eyes betraying the strain she'd been under. Yet there was an edge of triumph in her expression. "You survived far longer than any subject we've tested," she said, carrying a datapad close to her chest. "Not only did you hijack a Reaver, you destroyed a Titan-class war engine. Do you realize what that means?" Cade met her gaze evenly. "It means they'll come back." Patel nodded, unflinching. "Yes, but now we know they can bleed. We've recovered telemetry from the Reaver you controlled, data we can use to interface with more of their war machines. Imagine a human fleet of hijacked Forsaken technology." Rice frowned, arms crossed tightly. "You're talking like this is a solution. Cade nearly died, and your success rate is what, 0 before this? One pilot isn't enough to turn the tide." Patel's eyes hardened. "It's a start, a victory, and we don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect answers." She turned to Cade. "You've proven it's possible. Now we can replicate the process." "Replicate?" Cade echoed, his voice low. Patel hesitated but pressed on. "The neural load that nearly killed you wasn't random. It came from the raw connection. We can dampen it with further modifications, distribute the strain across multiple pilots, a team." Cade swung his legs over the edge of the cot, his strength returning slowly. "You want to put more people in that chair, risk more lives." "Yes," Patel said firmly, "because if we don't, we lose everyone." Cade looked at her for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. Finally, he stood, wavering only slightly before straightening. "How long?" Patel blinked. "What?" "How long until you can set this up?" Cade clarified, his voice steady now, though his body was still battered. Patel's confidence returned in a flash. "Days, a week at most. We'll need volunteers, people willing to fight." Ray shook her head, her tone incredulous. "Volunteers? Do you think anyone wants to hook their brains up to alien tech and fry like eggs?" "Some will," Cade said quietly. Ray's turned to him, shock and frustration in her eyes, but he held up a hand. "They'll do it because the alternative is extinction. People will fight when there's no choice left." Ray's exhaled sharply, but said nothing more. A loud boom rumbled through the walls of the bunker. The faint, distant noise of explosions echoed like thunder. Patel's eyes widened, and Cade knew the truth before she said it. "They're back," Patel murmured. Alarms blared through the bunker. Lights flashed red, and the steady, mechanical voice of the bunker's defense aide came online. "Warning, Forsaken forces inbound. Multiple Titan-class signals detected. Bunker breach in T-minus 20 minutes. The survivors stirred in panic, voices rising as fear spread like wildfire. Reyes grabbed her rifle, already barking orders to rally defenses. Cade straightened his back, pain forgotten, his mind already sharpening into focus. Paddle looked at him desperately. Cade, if we had just a little more time. We don't, Cade cut her off. If they breach the bunker, it's over. Reyes called from the corridor. Cade, we need you. Cade turned to Patel. Prep the neural link. I'll buy you your time. Her face paled. If you go back in now, it might kill you. Cade gave her a grim smile as he grabbed his rifle and marched toward the chaos outside. Then I'll make sure I take plenty of them with me. Cliffhanger. As the bunker's defenses power up, Cade steps back into the fire. The Forsaken are coming with overwhelming force, but humanity's defiance has only begun. The ground trembled beneath Cade's boots as he sprinted down the corridor, the sound of approaching Forsaken forces growing louder with each step. He could hear the shrill wail of the airlocks opening and the frantic shouts of survivors rallying in the bunker's last line of defense. But none of it mattered. Time was the one thing they didn't have. Commander. Reyes shouted, her voice tight with urgency. She was already in position at the front gates, her rifle aimed at the sealed blast doors. The pressure of the moment hadn't dulled her resolve. You're insane. The neural load is still dangerous. You'll die in minutes if you. I don't have minutes, Cade snapped. His gaze swept across the group of soldiers now lined up, ready to fend off the incoming onslaught. We need to give Patel enough time to finish whatever she's working on. Rey's face hardened, but she didn't argue. She understood the stakes. Without another word, Cade stepped into the small, reinforced chamber where the Forsaken neural interface sat, its alien design glowing faintly as though beckoning him. Patel was already there, her team working frantically to fine-tune the systems. She turned toward him, her brow furrowed in concern. Are you sure about this? Patel asked, her voice almost pleading. You're barely standing. Cade looked at the device. It was an unholy mix of human ingenuity and Forsaken malevolence. The chair seemed to hum with an energy of its own, as if it knew what he was about to do. We don't have a choice, Cade said, his voice rough. I'm not going to let them take this bunker. I'll hold them off as long as I can, but you need to finish what you started. Patel swallowed hard, nodding in reluctant agreement. I'll have the link ready. Cade lowered himself into the chair once more. The cables attached to his skull felt like icy tendrils as they snaked their way into his nervous system. The pain was immediate, excruciating, but this time he was ready. He closed his eyes, focusing on the familiar hum of the interface. He could feel the Reaver's massive presence in his mind, pulsing, waiting. Sync in 3, 2. Patel's voice faded as Cade's mind was pulled back into the storm of alien consciousness. The world around him dissolved, replaced by a dark and distorted version of the battlefield. Cade could feel the Reaver's systems waking up, its metal frame humming as though it had never been offline. The distant sounds of Forsaken voices filled his ears, alien words vibrating in his skull, but his mind twisted them into static. The Reaver was his now, its thoughts bending to his will. A harsh, brutal light filled his vision, and the ground beneath him shook. There in the distance were the Forsaken forces, their titans, drones, and foot soldiers, approaching the bunker with unrelenting purpose. Cade's heart pounded in his chest. The neural link was straining. He could feel his brain starting to burn again, the sharp tendrils of pain creeping through his limbs. But he pushed it aside, focusing on the machines. His thoughts surged forward, commanding the Reaver to move. The massive war machine rose to its feet. Cade's mind exploded with sensory data, weapon systems, targeting solutions, movement protocols. He let it all flood him, knowing he couldn't afford to hesitate. The Forsaken were nearly on top of them. Target locked. Cade's mind aligned with the Reaver's cannon, and he fired. The energy blast shot out with blinding speed, striking a Forsaken Titan square in the chest. The explosion sent a shockwave across the battlefield, throwing drones into the air like toys. "First blood," Cade muttered, feeling a sick thrill coursing through him despite the agony. He twisted the Reaver's form, moving like a predator. More Forsaken forces were charging toward him, drones swarming, infantry rushing in waves, their alien energy weapons crackling. The Reaver's arm shifted, its plasma cannon firing in rapid succession. Each shot tore through the enemies, disintegrating them on impact. But then a shadow fell over him, a titan much larger than the first, its eyes glowing with an ominous intensity. Cade's breath hitched. This one was faster, smarter, and it was closing the gap. "Brace for impact," Patel's voice echoed through his mind, but the connection was flickering. The Forsaken Titan fired. Cade's world exploded into blinding light as the beam ripped through the air toward him. He barely had time to react. He thrust the Reaver forward, moving with a speed he didn't think possible, the energy beam grazing the machine's shoulder as he collided with the Titan. The impact rattled his bones, the Reaver's massive fists slamming into the Titan's hull. Cade pushed all of his will into the machine, feeling the brutal force of the impact rock through him. For a moment, neither Titan moved. Then, with a roar of fury, Cade swung the Reaver's plasma cannon down on the Forsaken Titan's exposed energy core, firing point blank. The resulting explosion sent debris flying in all directions, and Cade was thrown back, his mind flickering. Not yet. He grunted through the pain, his vision spinning. He wasn't done. But as he rose, a new wave of Forsaken reinforcements appeared. More Titans, more drones, more machines, each one faster and deadlier than before. The battle was far from over, and Cade had just begun. Cliffhanger. The forces are overwhelming, but Cade refuses to back down. As new threats loom, will the neural link hold long enough for humanity to win? Cade's vision blurred as the explosion from the Forsaken Titan's core threw him backward. The Reaver's systems flickered violently, disorienting his senses, but his grip remained firm. The neural link burned like fire in his brain, a suffocating pressure as if his skull was being squeezed in a vice. Yet, amid the agony, a surge of adrenaline kept him alive. He couldn't afford to lose focus, not now. His thoughts pulsed through the Reaver's body, reaching for every weapon system, every piece of its jagged metallic frame. Cade's body shook with the strain as his heart raced, but he pushed onward. Come on, he muttered to himself. His fingers twitched involuntarily, the sensation of the Reaver's massive claws responding to his command like an extension of his own body. His mind, tethered to the machine, adapted quickly. His pain became fuel. Every moment of agony made him sharper, more desperate. Another wave of Forsaken Titans loomed ahead. The ground quaked as they advanced, their hulking forms moving with terrifying speed, their weapon systems charging for the kill. The first Titan unleashed a volley of plasma bolts toward Cade, but he was already moving. The Reaver leaped, its massive feet crashing into the cracked earth, clearing the incoming barrage by inches. Targeting, locked, Cade whispered through clenched teeth. The Reaver's arms raised, twin plasma cannons charging. He unleashed a torrent of fire, the energy beams scorching the air, vaporizing the drones that rushed in like an unrelenting swarm. The first Titan staggered, sparks flying from its armored shell, but it wasn't enough to stop it. The second Titan, faster than the first, surged forward, its cannon charged and ready. Cade's mind raced. He was outnumbered, outgunned. His heart thudded in his chest, the pounding rhythm sensing with the Reaver's movements. He couldn't hesitate. Patel, Cade gasped, his voice strained as he fought to maintain control of the neural link. I need more power, now. Patel's voice crackled in his ear, urgent. You're pushing the limits. The link is reaching critical mass. I don't have time for limits, Cade snapped. Give me everything you've got." Patel hesitated. Then the floodgates opened. The neural interface hummed louder, the energy surge boosting the Reaver's systems, sensing Cade with the machine in ways he could never have imagined. His vision split, two worlds, one human, one machine, intertwining. The Reaver became his senses, his strength, his purpose. A new clarity filled him. The incoming Titan's cannon fired, but Cade already saw it coming. The Reaver twisted sideways, dodging the blast with impossible agility. It closed the gap, its claws outstretched, and with a roar of fury, Cade plunged the Reaver's fist directly into the Titan's exposed core. Sparks erupted, and the machine's massive form crumpled under the weight of Cade's strike. But the battle was far from won. The last Titan, larger and deadlier than the others, loomed on the horizon. Its presence was almost suffocating, a wall of armor and weaponry that threatened to crush the last remnants of humanity. Drones, infantry, and other Forsaken machines crowded in, their numbers seemingly infinite. Cade could feel the weight of it all, the lives on the line, the desperate fight for survival, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could last. But then he saw it, the faint shimmer of a weakness, a small gap in the Titan's armor. The Reaver moved faster than Cade thought possible, its frame closing in on the target. He reached for everything he had, every ounce of power, every shred of will. The Titan's cannon fired, but Cade was already there, the Reaver's clawed hand plunging through the Titan's chest. The explosion was deafening, a massive burst of light and energy that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The remaining Forsaken forces hesitated, their machines faltering for the first time. Cade stumbled back, the neural link flickering violently, and for a moment, it felt like his head was being split open. His body, weakened by the brutal strain, threatened to collapse. But through the chaos, he could hear something, voices, human voices, shouting in triumph. "We did it," Ray said, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. Cade's body shook with exhaustion, but a smile tugged at his lips. Not yet. The Forsaken were retreating, pulling back from the onslaught they had never expected. The tide was turning, but Cade knew the war was far from over. Humanity had won today, but the true battle was still ahead. As he looked out across the ruined battlefield, his heart pounding in his chest, Cade made a silent vow. Humanity would never fall, not as long as he was standing. Cliffhanger. The Forsaken may have retreated, but their defeat is only temporary. The war is far from over, and Cade knows the cost of victory is just beginning. Humanity has proven its strength, but at what price?